Oh boy.
What?
It's Nastinka and it's Ivan. That's
whatever.
Okay. We'll deal with that. Ho, ho, ho! This time we watch Season 8, Episode 13, Jack Frost.
It's Whoopi Goldberg, as you've never seen her before in Jumpin' Jack Frost.
Oh, that's not this one.
Listen, if you don't like multi-references, you're not going to like this show. Or the show it is based around.
All right. Well, first, some follow-up. Devoted listener Luke said on our Slack about cave dwellers, which we did a few episodes ago, and I meant to include this last time, but whoops. Anyway, Luke said that I watched Cave Dwellers tonight in preparation for the It's Just a Show episode. It's a good all-around episode. Lots of good sketches and riffs. Love the Foley segment in particular, although they really had no idea how to end it, which is, of course, one of the great things about the episode.
Exactly, that's why it rules.
But wasn't feeling the casual racism they heaped on Thong, though. He doesn't talk, so why is the voice they give him so Charlie Chan? That's not the film. That's something the trio of white guys added. Just one of those unfortunate moments where they could have done literally anything, and they leaned into material that was poor taste even at the time. I don't want to dwell on that too much. It was still a good episode, one that would be easy to show someone as an MST3K primer.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point that we did not discuss.
Yeah, I meant to mention it and forgot to, and that happens. But I'm glad to be reminded of it. It's absolutely the case. Like, I think they were just leaning into Charlie Chan tropes that even though he doesn't speak in that kind of voice, he is still the sort of mysterious Asian sidekick who is silent, which is another trope. And I feel like they were just marrying the tropes together. But I don't think they did it in a way that really distanced themselves from it effectively or showed how awful it was, or it just doesn't read very well these days.
No, I mean, the character of, I believe it's Dong, is an Asian mystic. And as such, they did give him a cheap accent. But I don't think it was done maliciously, but yeah, it is an oversight. It was one of those things where I'm sure the spirit was in the best possible of intentions, but it doesn't read that way now. You're right.
No, you're right. It wasn't intentional. It was casual racism. It wasn't professional racism.
The best kind of racism.
And I'm sure that if Joel and Trace and everybody watched the episode now, they'd cringe.
Yeah.
What else? We've got another message from our previous episode on Ator the Flying Eagle, where I brought up at the very end the fact that there was a D&D riff. And Amy, who is our lovely commenter over on YouTube very often, said, "Gents, there's a whole D&D sketch led by Tom/Kevin, though I can't remember which episode it is. It is in another Russian epic, The Sword and the Dragon." It's the opening sketch from that.
Oh.
It opens with Tom cajoling everybody into playing a D&D game. And Amy suggests, I think Murphy was very into the game, which is why he was a dungeon master. Also, there's still time to lure Beth in for a year-end appearance, as Jack Frost is quite lavishly decorated, just saying. Well, unfortunately, Beth is busy for the holidays, I suppose, and decided not to join us on our gorgeous movie from Russia. But she'll be back someday. We'll get her in the new year sometime.
It'll happen.
Yeah, so I rewatched that sketch, which I had forgotten about, even though that is a great little episode. And the sketch is, as I said to Amy, written by people who, if they've ever actually played D&D, are sure doing a good job hiding it. Like, all the jokes that they're making are sort of people who have read Tolkien and maybe played those, like, 80s text adventures on their computers, versus Jonah's joke about, like, making a rogue with strength instead of dex, which is very specific to D&D.
Right.
That, in fact, sort of underlines what I was thinking, that they didn't actually know D&D that well back then. But who knows? It was still a fun sketch.
Yeah. I vaguely remember that episode, so I that is conjuring up a memory. And, it's just perfect casting for Tom to be the one who's eagerly putting together a D&D game for the boys.
Yes.
That's terrific.
He's dressed in like a wizard robe and hat with a scepter, and there's a skull next to him with a candle on top, and he's got what's supposed to be like a dungeon master's guide in front of him. And of course he uses this big booming voice, and it's very imperious, and it's very fun.
Yeah, classic Tom.
All right, that is some of the follow-up. Another thing that happened recently, though, is that the Mads did Manos.
The Hands of Fate?
The very ones.
Crazy. Yeah, that was a real treat. I actually fell asleep, but I woke up a half hour in, and it was a terrific riff. And there were a couple of moments where they revisited past jokes, I think completely unintentionally. And yeah, it was an absolute delight. There was some great stuff, and Frank, the man with a golden heart, did a shout out to John Reynolds for his evocative performance as Torgo, and yeah, it was really, really nice. It was really fun, and there was a great chat with Jackie Newman-Jones after.
Yeah, it was a real treat, and there were maybe a few unfortunate suicide jokes made around like the first introduction of Torgo, and I don't know whether Frank was just not remembering the sad side of John Reynolds' story. They certainly weren't meant in a harmful way, but it felt a little unfortunate. But absolutely, it was clear that they loved the film even as they hate it. And Frank is both proud and ashamed that he more or less was the one who inflicted it on the world.
With great power comes great responsibility and all that.
Yes. And that was a lovely holiday treat to receive from the Mads. And it is indeed our holiday episode today. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy holidays, Adam.
Yes. I hope that you, unlike me, have not heard Paul McCartney's Wonderful Christmas Time, as I went 3 whole years without hearing that song. I thought I was successful, but unfortunately, in the kitchen area at my lovely job, someone has a Christmas playlist, and that thing's on it at least 3 times. So every time I go to pick up a complimentary soda from the fridge, I just hear that pew, 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 pew. Pew, 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 pew. And I swear to God, it is like Michael Myers is behind me with a knife.
Well, I have mostly managed to avoid it this year. I guess I haven't heard it because I've mostly managed to not go outside. And yeah, that's the trick, is to just stay inside. It keeps you safe from Paul McCartney and from Omicron.
Yes. This Christmas, give yourself the gift of a hermitage. A part of our hermitage.
All right, well...
I'm sorry, that was a great pun. Come on.
Yes. All right. Well, it's a holiday tradition around here for us to look at either a Christmas movie or one of the many Soviet Finnish Scandinavian films that they have done over the years, which they like to call Finno-Russian films, because the first one they did, the one that we did last year, was a Finno-Russian collab. I don't think any of the other ones they did are Finno-Russian. Certainly this one isn't, but they kept calling it that in the show, and why not? Jack Frost, let's talk about it.
Yeah, the judge will allow it. Also, the Mads, they're doing shorts next year, or like in January. It's going to be great.
That's true.
Buy your Mads today. Support your local Mads. Buy war bonds, etc.
Oh, and you can now buy some of their episodes individually.
Yes.
So if you miss Glenn or Glenda the 2 times they've done it, you can now buy it.
And if they have the Tingler there, get that, because I think that's my favorite of all the ones they've done.
All right, let's go.
This time we watch Season 8, Episode 13, Jack Frost. Jack Frost is the tender story of a father named Jack Frost, who just can't make time for his son. Oh, how he longs to get away from his job as a highly paid music producer or something, but he's got to provide. Anywho, his life gets turned upside down when he dies in a car accident and is reincarnated as a sentient, wisecracking snowman. Stay tuned for an unforgettable scene where he bonds with his neglected son and plays guitar. It can only be described as the most embarrassing thing Michael Keaton was in since Rabbit Test. Dweezil Zappa, son of Frank and best known for his role as Ajax on the cult hit Duckman, has a small role where, I'm being told by our intern that that's the wrong Jack Frost summary. Apologies. I've received the correct summary. Here we go. Jack Frost is the tender story of a father who just can't make time for his son. Luckily, a serial killer named Jack Frost gets his life turned upside down when he dies in a car accident and is reincarnated as a sentient, wisecracking snowman. Stay tuned for an unforgettable scene where Shannon Elizabeth from American Pie is surprised by Jack Frost in the tub, and he proceeds to use his carrot nose to, I'm being told by our new intern that that's the wrong Jack Frost summary, and the previous megaphonic intern has been sacked. Apologies. I've received the correct summary. Here we go. Jack Frost is the tender story of Nastinka, a sweet girl who lives with her wicked stepmother and slovenly stepsister. Every day, Nastinka is forced to do all the chores and receive abuse with gentle good humor. Nastinka falls in love with Ivan, an impudent young narcissist from the village who runs afoul of a mushroom wizard and is subsequently turned into a bear. Cursed with resembling Gentle Ben, Ivan sets out to break his curse by performing good deeds. Meanwhile, Nastinka is sent to the woods to freeze by her stepmother. Ivan eventually transforms from a bear into a man again, like a reverse-altered beast. But Nastinka done goofs with a magic scepter and falls into an allegedly permanent slumber. Will the two young lovers ever reunite? Only the gentle wizard, Father Frost, knows for sure. Spoilers, Nastinka eventually is called to rise from her grave. Yeah, another Altered Beast ref. And she and Ivan live happily ever after. Oh, and Nastinka's stepsister has a weird adventure of her own after she's humiliated by the townsfolk for being so ugly and wretched, and eventually encounters Father Frost. The end.
Meanwhile, on the satellite of love, Mike Nelson is Lord of the Dance. Anyway, meanwhile, back on the planet, I guess, we're still waiting for Pearl to get back from dropping the kids off, so Bobo and Brain Guy are arguing about which of them is in charge. They bring Mike down to mediate their dispute, and soon the two are learning to accept hard truths about themselves and to learn how to accept that they need to get along. And bathe. They need to bathe. Segment 2 has Crow using Mike's credit card to bring a specialist on the issues about Russian culture raised by the film, namely comedian Yakov Smirnoff. It's not very enlightening. Crow turns into a bear for segment 3, but Mike and Tom are pretty sure it's just a costume. Meanwhile, Bobo and Brain Guy are getting along pretty well now. After a quiet moment, they both admit that Pearl can be a little mean sometimes. Oh, and then Bear Crow mauls Tom. Segment 4 is a lot like Segment 2, but now, instead of Yakov Smirnoff, it's a random butcher in Maine. Well, all right, not random, but it's too complicated to get into here. Anyway, the butcher is even less enlightening than Yakov Smirnoff. After the movie, Tom is dressed up in a dress and has big anime eyes glued to his bubble, and he tries telling Mike and Crow that he's adorable. But they willfully misunderstand him, and he gets frustrated. Back on the planet, Bobo and Brain Guy have been drinking and talking about ape movies. They get into a fight, as you do, and they bring Mike down to once again mediate. But then Pearl gets back, and she asserts her authority by proclaiming that Dunstan Checks In is the finest ape movie. Well, I can't argue with that. The end.
Wow. Okay, so we did it. We are back in season 8, and, we have a pseudo Finnish movie, I guess, because there's no Finland involved. But Chris, did you have an easy time finishing this episode?
Yeah, I did. This was a pretty decent episode, all things considered. I mean, it was pretty decent for season 8, let's put it that way.
To say the least, yes.
Yeah, I didn't hate this one at all. There were some nice things about it. I guess there were a few moments where I wish that they hadn't made a particular joke or something. But, fun, pretty movie, although it would have been prettier if they had a good print of it. And it's very silly in some ways. And some of the riffs were pretty funny. And the sketches were all right. It's always the weakest part around this time in the show's life. But still, I don't know. I had a perfectly fine time. 3 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, that is exactly what I would say. This was easy, breezy, beautiful cover girl. This was a very, very light and fun watch. It's not the best episode of MST3K ever. It's not the best episode of season 8. It's not even the best of the Russo Finnish movies. But it is a very, very fun movie to watch. You could totally watch this on its own and be totally delighted by how weird it is and how much joy they clearly had making it. There's an infectiousness to the movie alone that is really appealing. And also, the riffs are solid, but not exactly home runs every time. And the sketches are pleasant enough. and there's a sick Dunstan checks in reference, which I will always support. Yeah, and everybody, with the exception of the bear sketch, which I confess I hated. Everybody's used pretty well, and like Pearl used sparingly is fun here because she's always fun when she's not doing the mad scientist shtick. She's so much more fun when she's like cash, and she's cash here. And Bobo and Brain Guy getting along is much more interesting than what they normally do. Again, it's like this could have been a lesson, but that's not the path they went down. But I'm not here to harp on the sci-fi era again. It was fun because our listeners love it, but it was fun. Oh my, I had a real good time watching this. Totally solid, not the best, not the worst, pretty good.
Great. What are we going to talk about next time? Oh, wait.
We are going to finally make good on our promise and make this an all Emmanuel podcast.
What else? I guess I don't have anything else to say about the episode.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right, cool. Let's talk about things in an increasing order of how tangentially related they are to the episode.
Yeah, no Ronnie Dangerfield ones this time, alas.
Well, we'll see. So, Adam, let's start by apologizing to the nice people for how you butchered the Russian names in your summary.
Again, send your complaints and clues to crimes to Scruff McGruff, Chicago, Illinois, 60652.
So Nastinka, Ivan, all these nice people. This movie is based on a fable, as you might imagine, a Russian fairy tale called Morozko. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I'm going to try my best. It was collected by a Russian fairy tale collector in the 19th century, and then it was translated into English by a guy named Andrew Lang, who did a lot of that sort of thing at the very end of the 19th century, and it was translated as The Story of King Frost.
I kind of guessed that was a fable because I felt that the resulting movie was fabulous. It was totally fabulous. I loved it. And, don't harp on yourself about pronunciation. Because don't get Morozko over this. Now they say, Chris, that a love of making puns is a sign of brain damage. So bye, everybody.
I don't know if I believe that, but here's the thing. This clearly is a fairy tale movie for all sorts of reasons. And one of the things that happens with fairy tales is that when you retell them, especially when you retell them for 2 hours, you add things to them. And you maybe add things from related fairy tales, or you just make stuff up that feels kind of fairy tale-ish. So, I want you to tell me what elements of today's movie you think were in the original fairy tale and which weren't.
Okay, so Nastinka's whole arc is in the original fairy tale.
More or less, yeah. It's definitely predominantly about the evil stepmother. She's the good daughter who's very pretty. We got the evil daughter who's very ugly, because, that's how that goes. Mm-hmm. And Nastinka turns out to be rewarded, and the ugly one gets punished.
Yeah.
As does the stepmother.
As it is in life.
Yes. So obviously some of the details about what happens along the way are going to change.
Yeah, I assume that all the stuff with Ivan did not happen, and that was just stuff they cobbled together from other things, because I assume that Ivan had a very small role in the original fable. Like, he's just Prince Charming who wakes her up from scepter sleep, and they get married happily ever after.
Not even. There is no Ivan at all.
What?
Not a little bit of Ivan at all.
Oh, but the bear stuff is some of the best stuff in the movie.
Yeah, the bear stuff is entirely from elsewhere. That might be from a different fairy tale, I'm not sure, but it's not from this one.
From BJ and the Bear.
So what else do you think is original or not original?
I definitely think that wrestling with a bunch of like mischievous dwarves is not part of the original tale.
Nope. No, again, that's part of Ivan's plot, and so that does not happen in this story. Again, I'm sure it's from another one, but...
Yeah. And the House with Legs, I mean, that's from the Baba Yaga, is it not?
Yes, and Baba Yaga is not part of this story. No. We'll talk about her in a little bit.
Okay. So I think I've got it narrowed down.
Okay. What about King Frost, Jack Frost, Father Frost, whatever you want to call him in this?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, given that he's like the major focus of the film, I would say that he is a part of the Nastinka story.
Yes, he is absolutely there. Some of his plot points are a little bit more interesting, perhaps, in the original story. You might remember there's a moment when Father Frost encounters Nastinka and asks her if she's cold 3 times, which is very fairy tale to do.
Yeah.
It's interesting in the movie because he just kind of asks her and then runs around the tree and asks her again, and then runs around the tree and asks her again. And it's kind of dumb and pointless. In the original story, King Frost finds her out in the woods where the stepmother has ordered her to be sent to presumably freeze and die. And King Frost says, "Are you warm, maiden?" And she says, "Oh, quite warm," shivering. And then King Frost stoops down and makes it colder, and the air seemed to be full of knives and darts. And again he asked, "Are you warm? Are you warm, you beautiful girl?"
Good.
And though her breath was almost frozen on her lips, she whispered gently, "Quite warm, King Frost." Then King Frost gnashed his teeth and crackled his fingers, and his eyes sparkled, and the crackling, crisp sound was louder than ever. And for the last time he asked her, "Maiden, are you still warm? Are you still warm, little love?" And the poor girl was so stiff and numb that she could just gasp, "Still warm, O king." Now her gentle, courteous words and her uncomplaining ways touched King Frost, and he had pity on her, and he wrapped her up in furs and covered her with blankets, and fetched a great box in which were beautiful jewels and a rich robe embroidered in gold and silver, and she put it on and looked more lovely than ever. And King Frost stepped with her into his sledge with 6 white horses. And it's like, okay, that is a much more high-stakes scene than what we get in the movie, where it's just like, "You cold? You cold? You cold? Okay." there's real like, no, I'm gonna be cruel. I'm gonna make it as cold as possible for you to see if you complain. Later in the story, the stepmother finds out about this and insists that no. Her daughter should be the one to get so treated by King Frost. And so she sends her daughter out. And King Frost once again sees her and goes up to her and says, "Are you warm, maiden?" And, of course, the bad girl says, "What a blind old fool you must be to ask such a question. Can't you see that my hands and feet are nearly frozen?" So he freezes her to death.
Then he turns to the camera and says, "Ain't I a Nastinka?" like he's Bugs Bunny.
And then the mother comes out to find her, and she freezes to death.
This is starting to sound a lot like the Christmas story I wrote when I was in grade 6.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You've heard that, right?
I don't think so.
Oh, I wrote this story. It was called The Pumpkin's Christmas because you had to write a Christmas story. And I liked Halloween, so I call it The Pumpkin's Christmas. This is before Nightmare Before Christmas, by the way.
All right.
So I'm the true original here. Tim Burton, get out of here. But to summarize, The Pumpkin's Christmas is about a sad little pumpkin boy who wants to know the true meaning of Christmas, but his parents don't know. So he asks everyone in the woods, including a talking tree and a squirrel, what is Christmas? And they all give him different answers, like it's presents and it's decorations and trees and whatnot. And anyway, he's out for a long time, and that story just abruptly stops. We cut back to the parents who are like, "Where's our son?" And they find their child frozen to death under a tree, and they proceed to take their son inside and bake him into a pumpkin pie. And Santa Claus comes, and they ask Santa what the true meaning of Christmas is, and he helps. And the phrase "he helps himself to a slice of their son" is in the text. That's what I wrote, and says the true meaning of Christmas is family and friends. The end.
Amazing. Wow, that is a little bit more specific and spicy than this is, but maybe it just needed to be translated by you as a child.
I think I am simpatico with the kind of things that Morosco seems to offer.
There's one other detail that I wanted to point to that is changed from the original story. A mushroom guy isn't there, as you might imagine. Most of the other stuff isn't there. The visit from the people who want to marry one of the daughters, that is implied, but it's not there. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that is in the original story that is treated somewhat differently is the dog. Do you remember the dog?
Actually, no.
You might remember him. He's there very early in the film when Nastinka steps outside and has to do the chores and has to finish knitting together the sock before sunrise, and talks to the dog for a little bit and then talks to the rooster for a little bit. Well, the dog has a much bigger role in the original story because the dog starts talking
Okay. It's a real Puchinsky.
Exactly. So after Nastenka has been left out to freeze, and after the stepmother thinks that she is in fact dead, she says to her husband, "Old man, you'd better go out into the fields and find your daughter's body and bury her."
He also adds, "Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were."
Yep. And just as the old man was leaving the house, the little dog under the table began to bark, saying, "Your daughter shall live to be your delight. Her daughter shall die this very night."
Ooh, I like that.
"Hold your tongue, you foolish beast," scolded the woman. "There's a pancake for you, but you must say, her daughter shall have much silver and gold, but his daughter is frozen quite stiff and cold." But the dog eats the pancake and then says, "His daughter shall wear a crown on her head. Her daughter shall die unwooed, unwed."
Whoa.
He does a few more things, and the woman keeps trying to get him to eat if he says the right thing, but he only says the truth.
I love this Poochie the rockin' dog that showed up.
But he keeps eating the stuff anyways. So I can't believe they didn't have the dog talk in the movie. That would have been great.
Yeah. It runs through that great Drew Gooden video about recent Christmas movies where there's a Home Alone ripoff with the talking dog.
Yep. Link in the show notes if you haven't seen that yet.
Very good video, very good YouTuber.
But this is a classic example of a story with an evil stepmother in it.
Indeed. Yeah, that's quite the trope.
Yeah. I remember when my father got remarried and I got my own stepmother when I was about 7 or 8. I was fully expecting her to be evil because stepmothers were evil.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was a kid then, and like all kids, quite dumb. But nevertheless, it still took me a while to realize that actually, no, like there were, stepmother comes from a different culture, different expectations in parenting and so forth, different styles of parenting. But, it turns out my stepmother was actually pretty great. And we got along perfectly fine after we got accustomed to each other, so to speak. So I just remember how much that idea of the wicked stepmother just permeated children's literature. Did you grow up with a bad taste for stepmothers?
Well, not exactly. I mean, I do know about the cliche, but my father remarried when I was a teenager, so my stepmother was not a big part of my life then. She really wasn't a stepmother at all. Like, she did not mother me. Like, they married when I was like 17, so I was already on my way out the door. And my mother never remarried, so there was never a step figure around. But yeah, I'm totally familiar with this from the movies.
Yeah.
Such as The Parent Trap with Haley Mills and Haley Mills.
Oh, right. I didn't think about that. There's a step parent in that? I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Yeah, like the millionaire dad's going to marry a real gold digger, and it's up to Haley Mills and Haley Mills to put a stop to it.
Oh. I think of it more like The Sound of Music.
Yeah, well, they also have to escape the Nazis in Parent Trap. That's the real Parent Trap.
My. That is a real evil stepmother.
But it is.
Is there anything else that makes you think of?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is a bizarre little movie from a director I have a love-hate relationship with, is a fella named Larry Cohen. And it's one of the last films he did. Larry Cohen is one of those dudes who is the most brilliant idea man in the world. He came up with a great little film called God Told Me To use just one example, where there's a rash of killings in New York. And whenever the detective interviews the killer, who is always completely passive, they all say the same thing. God told me to. Now, if you think that's going to go somewhere cool, I'm afraid you're mistaken, because it turns out it was all aliens and it sucks.
Oh.
Yeah, that film goes places and they're all dumb. But it's a great, like, those first 20 minutes are so tense and so good. And Larry Cohen is often a guy who will have a brilliant idea and will completely sabotage it even before the end credits roll. But he made a film called Wicked Stepmother, which is only known because it's the last film of Bette Davis's.
Oh, yes. Because late in her life, I know, because I watched a very nice Be Kind Rewind video about her. Link in the show notes. Totally recommend that YouTuber as well.
Very good YouTuber.
Yes. Because, late in her life, she couldn't get work because Hollywood hates women. And, I mean, to put it bluntly, and she would work in anything that would have her. And horror welcomes everyone, especially aged imperial women.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's the great thing about horror. It keeps on giving, and everyone has a home there, and everyone is loved there, and that love is eternal. That's a fact.
It's a bloody love, but it's a love.
Yeah, and frankly, the best loves are bloody. No further comment. But
how is she in it?
Well, she's present in the movie, although that is debatable. She left production halfway through. So the movie inexplicably has Bette Davis as the Wicked Stepmother transforming into a much more attractive younger woman. It's got a great poster where the two of them are standing side by side and there's like lightning coming down. It looks vaguely like Death Becomes Her, which I think came out later. But yeah, she's not particularly engaged, and it's because she hated everything about the movie, obviously. Bette Davis is great. And Larry Cohen did the best he could. Otherwise, the entire movie would be scrapped. But it totally stinks. She's a witch, and it's kind of a comedy, but it's not funny. And you're only watching it because Bette Davis is in it, and she's barely in it.
Oh well. Next time. And so, as I mentioned, we have an interloper in this story, Baba Yaga, or as she's known in Russian, Baba Yaga.
Yes.
Because I guess we like to say things wrong in English.
That's true. And I, from what I understand, a lot of people incorrectly think of the title as Teenage Wasteland. I've been waiting for that. I saw Baba Yaga as a topic. I was like, oh, I guess up for this.
In my D&D campaign, we encountered a rub off the serial numbers Baba Yaga, and she had a much more complicated Russian-esque name that we couldn't remember, and so we just called her Baba Ganush.
Very good.
What do you know about Baba Yaga?
I know all about, like, I know there's a witch. I know there's a big chicken-like house, which has actually shown up in some horror movies I've watched, like A House with Legs or A House with Animal Legs. That's like a thing I have seen before I knew about Baba Yaga. But yeah, like I know the gist, but that's kind of it. Enlighten us, Chris.
Well, it's tricky to enlighten you because Baba Yaga is one of those characters who appears, as far as I can tell, again and again, taking on different roles in different fairy tales.
Oh, like Batman.
Somewhat like Batman.
Yeah, you can have an Adam West Batman who is often known as the White Knight, and you could have your Dark Knights and such.
But also sometimes Baba Yaga is, I mean, she's usually the baddie, the mean person, but sometimes she is helpful. So, she's just this weirdo who's very helpful and yet intense, which I guess is sort of what she's like in this movie. I feel like this movie captures my sense of her, at least, which is not informed by anything, really, but the sense of somebody who's really intense and will eat you, but also if you sort of impress her enough, she'll help you out.
But basically, you're describing me.
There you go.
Yeah. Helpful but intense is on my business card.
She is described as eating people as if they were chickens in one story.
Again, perfect description of me. I am like the classic Critters from the hit film Critters and Critters 2, the main course.
I guess there's also a little bit of gender ambiguity around her as well, but I don't know. I don't fully know this. I do want to talk about one of the stories that she is in, famously, a story that is called Vasilisa the Beautiful, which was another Russian fairy tale collected, I believe, by the same guy who collected this one in today's movie. Mm-hmm. And it is another stepmother story, of course.
Whoa.
So Vasilisa's mother dies when she's still a girl. And as she dies, she gives her a doll. And you might like this. The mother tells Vasilisa to always keep the doll around her. And whenever she's having trouble, she should give the doll a little something to eat and drink, and it will help her. And so when the mother passes, she gives it a little food and a little something to drink, and it comforts her. And after the mother passes, the father remarries and brings in a stepmother who's very cruel, and of course asks Vasilisa to do too much work, but she feeds the doll a little something, and the doll does all the household tasks for her. And this absolutely frustrates Vasilisa's stepmother and the evil stepsisters, right? You've heard this kind of story before.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, the father's out on merchant business, and the stepmother and the stepsisters cook up some excuse that basically say, oh no, the candles have all gone out. We must get a light from Baba Yaga. And they're like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. You do it, Vasilisa. So she goes out there. And Baba Yaga asks her to do a bunch of tasks, and she feeds the doll. Doll helps her out. And basically, she impresses Baba Yaga with all that she's able to do. And so Baba Yaga gives her a glowing skull.
Whoa.
And she takes the glowing skull home, and she wants to sort of leave it behind because she's getting home. She's like, I don't want to help these people. But she hears a voice say, no, they'll need this. And she brings the skull inside the house, and it stares directly at the stepmother and stepsisters and burns them to ashes.
So, good story.
Yeah. And then she feeds the doll and says, thank you. Oh, and there's sort of a coda where she runs off and finds a nice old woman to live with, and the doll makes some really fancy clothes, and the old woman takes them to the Tsar, and the Tsar thinks that they're very impressive and asks to marry Vasilisa, and so she becomes the wife of the Tsar.
Whoa.
So I guess happy ending? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to really make heads or tails of that one.
I mean, I mean, that's the thing with these stories is that, like, it's not my culture, let's say, in many ways. And the way that people are rewarded or punished doesn't always make sense to me.
No. See, what's funny is that you are describing this story, but it also sounds like exactly what would happen if I sat you down and forced you to watch a bunch of Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're part of that tradition, right? Or at least I assume they're pulling some inspiration from there as well as a bunch of other places.
Yeah. Well, what is the Crypt Keeper if not an old witch, really?
If not an old Russian woman telling you a story. Speaking of which, if you actually watch the original movie, there's a really nice opening segment where it turns out that there's a storyteller this whole time. We've got our own Crypt Keeper at the beginning of it.
Whoa!
It looks more like, what's his shows from? Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Oh, Jambi?
Jambi. She sort of pops out of a box and is wearing brightly colored things and has a headdress on, so, looks a bit like Jambi.
I'm picturing Perini Scleroso from SCTV.
That's why there's a mysterious narration that happens a few minutes into it that, like, who the hell's talking? They quip. And it's like, no, there's just, you've cut off the first few minutes where we find out who the narrator is. But she doesn't really come back, so.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 unique snowflake-sized facts about today's experiment, Jack Frost. Go, Chris, go!
Writing about today's experiment in the sci-fi equivalent of the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide, Mary Jo Peele says Jack Frost has, quote, one of my favorite characters ever. She writes, the stepsister was mean and spiteful and spoiled, but I dare say she wasn't irredeemable, nor can she wholly be blamed. She was a product of bad parenting. And she made me laugh, especially when she's getting made up by her mother, when she's trying to fake her way through dinner, and most especially when she brawls with Jack Frost himself.
Gypsy is in attendance in the opening segment to watch Mike Nelson's Lord of the Dance. Regrettably, this is the final appearance of Jim Mallon as Gypsy. Now, the relationship between Mallon and the rest of the Best Brains cast and crew is contentious, and Misties tend to demonize the guy as a result. Regardless of creative disagreements and screwing the brains out of royalties and their own personal property, he really was an MVP cast member as Gypsy. Truly the end of an era.
As Nastinka speed knits, Mike does a sweet Pee Wee Herman impression.
You keep knitting, knitting, knitting.
That line comes courtesy of one of the greatest movies of all time, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, when Pee-wee describes the labyrinthine conspiracy to steal his bike as being like an unraveling cable knit sweater that someone keeps knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting.
We hear a faint buzzing as the mean stepsister sleeps, and Mike quips,
Hey, listen, that's Spock in really fast motion.
This is a reference to the classic third season Star Trek episode, Wink of an Eye, in which Kirk is taken by an alien species to, provide their women with seed. Anywho, the species in question experiences time differently from humans and Vulcans, and thus their speech is so accelerated to our ears that it sounds like a noisy housefly whenever they talk. Anywho again, Kirk is sped up, but Spock speeds himself up to save him before both Captain and Science Officer are back to normal speed.
Describing the two people viewing Nastinka at dinner, Tom tosses out the names of two actors.
Larry Drake and Vanessa Redgrave.
Larry Drake is probably best remembered for his moving and underplayed turn as Benny, the developmentally disabled clerk on LA Law.
Some might remember Larry Drake for a similar role in the terrific horror movie of the week, Dark Night of the Scarecrow, or the title character in the less than stellar Dr. Giggles. Of course, his true greatness was shown in his scene-stealing turn as the evil, preening mobster Durant, Robert G. Durant, in Sam Raimi's best film, Darkman. Oh, and Larry Drake, fun fact, I paid to see American Pie 2 in theaters because his name was listed in the credits on IMDb. Drake only appears in the pre-credits teaser and doesn't have a single line of dialogue. I did not receive a refund.
Vanessa Redgrave, on the other hand, is a powerhouse actor of stage and screen. You might remember her from Girl Interrupted, 1998's other meteor movie, Deep Impact, 1997's Mrs. Dalloway, and what Adam assures me is an astounding turn as a psychotic nun in Ken Russell's The Devils. She was also pretty good in Prick Up Your Ears as Joe Orton's literary agent, which I described in our episode on Parts the Clonus horror. Her sister, Lynn Redgrave, was a pretty good actor too.
Did you know Today's Experiment is an award-winning classic? In 1965, Jack Frost was awarded the Grand Prize Lion of San Marco at the 26th Venice International Film Festival. That's not even the only award bestowed on the film, as it also garnered the 1966 All-Union Film Festival Prize for the Best Children's Film.
Early in the film, as we're first introduced to Nastinka, Mike quips,
Is this a biopic of Holly Hobby?
Denise Holly Hobby was an illustrator who drew a young girl in a bonnet, named it after herself, and sold it to American Greetings. You know, the card company that isn't Hallmark.
Holly Hobby's Holly Hobby illustration was so popular that in the 1970s, they made a doll out of her. And then, in the 2000s, they started making TV shows and movies with her. Ooh. And now, there's a live-action Holly Hobby show on Hulu? And, well, anyway, yes, the original illustration does look a little like Nastinka.
Did the actor playing Baba Yaga look familiar? Well, if you're a fan of Soviet fairy tale films, then maybe. Georgy Milyar made a name for himself playing Baba Yaga in films such as 1939's Vasilisa the Beautiful, 1967's Fire, Water, and Brass Pipes, and 1972's The Golden Horns, all of which were directed by Alexander Rowe, who also directed Jack Frost. Truly, they were the Soviet Union's answer to Tim Burton and Johnny Depp.
Upon seeing Nastinka crying after Yvonne receives his barehead curse, Crow quips,
Well, she shouldn't cry. There's always Jerry Lee Lewis or Jerry Seinfeld or Ben Kingsley.
Hoo boy! To make some long story short, Ben Kingsley dated Kate Townsend, who was 30 years younger than the Gandhi actor at the time. MST3K guest star Jerry Seinfeld started dating his current wife when she was only 17. Rocker Jerry Lee Lewis famously and controversially married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Brown, in 1957. Oof.
Well, on a lighter note, Jack Frost, you loved the movie, now play the video game. Coming soon to your home entertainment system. Now a major motion picture starring Will Smith. Okay, maybe not that part, but believe it or not, there is a PC game based on the same folktale that inspired Jack Frost. We'll have a link to a long play of the game Fairy Tale about Father Frost, Yvonne, and Nastya in our show notes.
And that's time!
Hey, Adam.
Yes, sir?
Now, you might remember that although I've lived here in Canada for well over a decade at this point, I'm actually from the United States of America.
I know, you're a dual citizen like your beloved Matt Frewer.
Yes. So, well, no, actually, I'm not yet, but you know what I mean.
Oh, crap. Immigration, don't listen to this. Satire, parody.
I have a permanent residency. I just don't have citizenship here yet. Anyway, back in America, you know, they make podcasts.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. They do indeed. There's a big podcast industrial complex.
Indeed. But a wise man once told me that in Soviet Russia, they make cod paste.
Whoa, what? This is a blast from the past. Chris, have you recently grown a mullet? And are you wearing a Cosby-like sweater?
I like to think of it as a Yakov Smirnoff-like sweater, okay?
Let's try to bring that back. Let's try to make Yakov the real star here.
Oh, Yakov Smirnoff gets brought into this episode in one of the host segments, and, you know, he's no Rodney Dangerfield, but he's still a comedian who appealed to children in the 80s.
I guess, did kids like Yakov Smirnoff?
Yes.
I didn't. I loved Night Court, but I hated the Yakov character.
Oh man, he was fun for the whole family back in the 80s when we didn't know any better.
Oh man, yeah, I watched Night Court in the 80s when it was on, and the early 90s. And I loved Dan, and I loved Harry, and I loved Bull, and I loved Roz. But I hated Yakov, and I hated Brent Spiner as that weird hillbilly you kept playing.
We love Brent Spiner as a hillbilly in this house. I don't particularly remember Yakov in. I know he was kind of there, but I don't really remember him from Night Court. I remember him doing his shtick on like everything. He was everywhere. Yeah. His joke, because he really only had the one, was everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if there's only one Evening at the Improv episode ever filmed, or they just filmed multiple episodes with Yakov Smirnoff, but I saw that guy a lot growing up as a kid with a keen interest in the art of stand-up comedy.
Well, you study comedians. What do you know about the background and the lore and the history of Yakov?
Well, Yakov, everyone's least favorite Animaniac. Has had a super weird career. He made his living, of course, showing up saying, you know, in America this, in Soviet Russia that, which is so classic bad stand-up formula. It is exactly the same as women be shopping. It is exactly the same as white guys drive their cars like this, black guys drive their cars like this. But it worked for him. And he, of course, rose to superstardom because he came here, or he didn't come here. Canada forbids all Russians, but they would take him to jail. They would put that Smirnoff on ice. But he was a huge hit in America because his whole act was "Ain't America Grand? Doesn't Russia Suck?" which in the 1980s could make you very, very rich, as evidenced by the box office receipts of one such film known as Rocky IV.
Hey, do you want to hear a classic Yakov joke?
Is it about the hotel clerk feeling up his bag?
Here it goes. And I'm not going to do the accent, so. In Russia, we had only 2 TV channels. Channel 1 was propaganda. Channel 2 consisted of a KGB officer telling you, turn back at once to Channel 1.
That's not too bad.
It's not too bad. Some of them are not too bad. Here's another one. Okay. In every country, they make fun of city. He used a broken accent, of course.
Of course.
In every country, they make fun of city. In U.S., you make fun of Cleveland. In Russia, we make fun of Cleveland.
Okay.
That's not too bad.
It's not so bad. It's not so bad.
I can give you some of the worst ones if you want.
I'm not thrilled. Please do. I want to hear the worst of Yakov Smirnoff. This is like that Andrew Dice Clay album they recorded in front of 3 people and bombed.
All right, here are the 2 worst ones on this list of classic Yakov lines.
Excellent.
And I apologize in advance. This is Yakov speaking, not me. Also, it's the 80s speaking and not me.
The views of this podcast do not reflect the views of Yakov Smirnoff.
And vice versa.
Yep.
Russian men have a saying, women are like buses. That's it.
What?
That's it.
That's not even a joke. That's the premise of a joke.
The joke was that was enough.
Ugh.
But yes. And here goes. Actually, there's another one that's like that. I like American women. They do things sexually Russian girls never dream of doing, like showering.
Oh.
Yeah. But here's the one. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Homosexuality in Russia is a crime, and the punishment is 7 years in prison locked up with the other men. There's a 3-year waiting list.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, there's even worse ones, but I don't even think I'm going to read that one.
I don't know. In America, you have gay marriage. In Russia, gay marries you.
What?
That's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good joke. Classic.
I feel like
classic Yakov.
See, the Yakov wouldn't do this joke, but I feel like it needs to be in Russia. We have Sergei marriage. I don't know.
It's Sergei Eisenstein marriage. Super Dave Bob Eisenstein. Thank you.
So Yakov did very well in the 80s, and then I remember sometime around 91-ish, his career tanked for some reason.
Yeah, turns out that when you are dependent on the Cold War tension to get laughs, those will eventually fall away as politics change.
Yeah. Oh well. Except his career didn't actually tank; it just changed radically.
Yeah, he found love elsewhere when Hollywood stopped calling.
Yes. Because if there's one thing I know about Yakov Smirnoff, it's that he's still playing in his own theater in Branson, Missouri, and doing great.
Yeah, it's him and Dolly Parton and Shoji Tabuchi.
Yeah. I don't have anything more to say except how the hell is he packing houses every night in maybe not 2021, but let's say 2018.
Well, apparently Yakov has brushed up on his act a little bit to adjust to the times. Because now Yakov's thing, because he mastered the art of going thing A is not like thing B. So now his whole thing is women be different than men.
Oh.
Yeah. Like he's actually a relationship counselor now, sort of. He does a show/workshop where he gets men and women to start laughing more because he said, and I quote in an interview, "Oh, I see why laughter is no longer there. It's because we stopped doing what made it possible to begin with. That's the root of all relationship problems is not being able to laugh. And, frankly, thank you, Yakov Smirnoff, for getting us to laugh at love again." So that's a big thing. He has some weird ideas about men and women that don't seem true. Like, listen to this. Things like how men want to be admired for their accomplishments while women want to be cherished for who they are. It's like, I don't think that reflects, I think men and women want to be cherished for who they are and also want to be maybe not admired for their accomplishments because that sounds like being put on a pedestal, but have their accomplishments acknowledged and respected by their partner.
Yeah.
That sounds like wisdom if you don't know anything about men and women, but or just relationships in general. But what?
But maybe that sells in Branson.
Maybe it does. And he also does a summer intercession course at universities called The Business of Laughter.
Oh, that makes sense. He's made money off making people laugh for decades.
Yes. He was definitely more of a businessman than a comedian, not unlike Dane Cook. And, well, that's his whole thing. He talks about how to interact with bosses and fellow employees and how to use an easy, laugh-filled personality to create relationships and sustain yourself on the job. And he has... And I'm again quoting here. When they're laughing, it tells you the relationship they're in is flowing in the right way. You have a light bulb. I want to create a laugh bulb. Yeah. So Yakov still got it, is what I'm saying. Still got it.
Well, Adam, we've had a very merry Wintermas. And, it's time to cozy up with some nice hot cocoa and stop thinking about Jack Frost and get ready for whatever's to come on the horizon.
What is to come? What new terrors will 2022 bring us? But, Chris, I cannot help but ask, do you have time for just one more thing?
Ooh, if you've got a good one, I will make time for that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's good, but I liked it.
Have some confidence in yourself for once, Adam.
I can't. Do you know who my parents are? Oh, well. Okay. So, in the final segment, you may recall that there are a lot of ape media references.
Yes.
And Mike refers to Observer and Bobo as BJ and the Bear.
Right.
Yeah. Do you remember BJ and the Bear?
I mean, vaguely.
It sounds so filthy now.
It does. I think it sounded filthy then. I don't think it's not like BJs were invented in 1985.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. It is one of those totally regrettable names. But or is it an amazing name? I don't know. It kind of makes me think. It takes me back to when John Saxon had a role on that famous soap opera Falcon Crest, where he played a guy named Tony Cumson.
Well, BJ and the Bear is one of those titles where it's two lies for the price of one, because there ain't no BJs in this show and there ain't no bears.
Too naked, too lunch. Yep. So yes, what is BJ and the Bear, you ask? I'm glad you did. The 1978
No, I
NBC...
didn't. I've seen it. I told you.
Well, yes, but I'm talking to the audience now.
All right, tell the audience on behalf of them, remind me what BJ and the Bear was all about.
What do you, the viewers at home, think? Again, Scruff McGruff, Chicago, Illinois, 60652. 1978, NBC, be there for BJ and the Bear, which is about a trucker named BJ and a chimp named Bear. And the key to its success, it seems, they had a real Barney Fife, because in the first season, they frequently encountered Sheriff Lobo, played by none other than beloved punchline on this series, Claude Akins. And Akins' character was indeed a huge hit. And so much so that he was spun off into his own series called The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, which people only remember as a Simpsons reference. Lobo, bring back Sheriff Lobo. But yes, both those series were created by Glenn A. Larson, who is a huge name in TV because he created such enduring TV hits as Knight Rider, Magnum P.I., Nightman, Quincy M.E., and the original Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, that is a lot of stuff that I have seen.
Yeah, most of it terrible.
Yeah, there's some good bits. I mean, mostly it's the Knight Rider theme song, but there's some good bits.
Oh, no. Glenn A. Larson hiring Stu Phillips to do the scores for his shows was a masterstroke because, I mean, I can't stand Battlestar Galactica, but I sure can listen to it.
So, I don't care about BJ and the Bear anymore. I just want to know if you've watched The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo.
Yes. There's some of it on YouTube, or at least there was some of it on YouTube 5 years ago, and I'm like, what is this about? What is this? Because I've heard it as a joke. It's also been a joke on this show, unsurprisingly, in the Joel era.
Let's be real, in the Frank era.
Yeah, that is more accurate. I would love to hear Frank Conniff wax nostalgically. Yes, and there was The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, Claude Akins, Hunk, lit up the screen. Yeah. Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo is just you've got this inept curmudgeonly sheriff, and I don't know, it feels like Smokey and the Bandit without any of the things that made Smokey and the Bandit tolerable, not good. So it's a wild waste of time, but it's funny to watch this piece of TV detritus, and I don't know, I would not recommend it, but it is a great Simpsons joke, ain't it?
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you know any other fun stories starring Baba Yaga, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at @itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners just like you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits, and you can hang out with us in a private Slack, and you can help us have a very happy holidays. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And of course, if you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/107.
Oh, I think we've done it. I think we have dusted off all the snow from this Russian epic. We have taken off our bare heads. We have woken from our slumber from the terrible scepter that put us to sleep. What could possibly be on the way? So what you're saying is we're watching Manos again.
Legs. Yeah, no, it's time. It's finally time. It's finally time for the good Gamera.
Well, I've got good news and bad news, Chris.
What?
This is the best Gamera movie, yes. But as is tradition on this show, we don't watch the Comedy Central episode first. We will instead be watching KTMA episode 8, Gamera versus Guiron.
All right, but I haven't watched this KTMA episode yet, and so I can only hope that it's the best of the KTMA Gamera episodes, or at least that the print isn't so muddy that I can't enjoy it.
Well, it almost doesn't matter. It could be a Joel solo episode for all I care, because this is the most fun Gamera movie of them all.
It's true, and it's not like I don't have all the riffs from the Comedy Central one memorized, and it's not like they don't give me plenty of time to insert them.
Yeah, you could always just say Martha to yourself.
Don't start with me, Martha.
And this, of course, is the source of the great hello and thank you.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's the source of so many good times. I mean, not the KTMA one, but we'll finally get to the camera's song.
Yes, finally. It took us several years, but we finally really did it. You maniac, we did it.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to Gamuary, as all good children and adults do. In the meantime, hope everybody out there has a very happy holidays and a happy new year and stays safe and warm and all that stuff. But until we see you again,
mushroom wizards can be challenging, but ultimately therapeutic.
Take it away, Tap Squad. You'll keep knitting and knitting and knitting and knitting.